I had the honor of interviewing Nelson Mandela in the New York studios of CNN, and it was one of the great moments of my life because I regarded him as the greatest figure of the 20th century. The years of imprisonment, fighting for apartheid, and then to lead his country as president was unbelievable to me. And then, some years later, I think it was in 2001 or 2002, 2001 I think, I had the occasion to be in Johannesburg making a series of speeches for a group of banks. And the leaders of those banks were big supporters of Mandela, and they told him that I was in Johannesburg. And so he invited me to lunch, and I was there with my brother. And I went to his house, very modest house. And he came out and he was limping, he had a bad leg, and he was wearing suspenders in my honor. And we had a wonderful lunch, and a great afternoon. And you had the feeling in his presence that I was sitting with a giant. The next day, we had breakfast with de Klerk, who was the president of South Africa and who released, when apartheid ended, he was the man who released Mandela from prison. And de Klerk told me the story of calling Mandela and telling him that after 26 years he would be released the next day, and inviting Mandela to send a plane to Cape Town, and he would invite Mandela to fly up and speak to Parliament. Mandela politely refused, left the prison. Prison was on a little kind of island right across from Cape Town, came on a little moat over to the mainland and walked among the people, which is what he wanted to do. I think his greatness was not only in his leadership, but in his forgiveness. He was the classic example of the Judeo-Christian ethic of turning the other cheek and forgiving. When he assumed the presidency at his inaugural, three of his captors, three of the prisoners, the guards who watched over him, were invited and sat in the first row at his inauguration. Had he taken a different tact, say revenge, and one would have understood revenge, 26 years in prison just fighting for the rights of his people, there would have been bloodshed all over South Africa. Instead, he sent out an olive branch, and the rest is history. I think his legacy is one it touches so many bases. On moral leadership, on effective presidency, what a transition that was. Here's a country taken over after years of imprisonment, years of slavery. And unlike the civil rights movement in America was when that started to change, it ebbed state by state, changes of laws. This was a revolution that was peaceful after all those years of torment, and then suddenly these people had to govern themselves and be led by a man who was in prison for all those years. I went to that prison cell where he was held. Cape Town is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. The only American city I could compare to is San Francisco. And his prison was like not as far out as Alcatraz is from the San Francisco mainland, but just you could see it right. And from his window, he could look out on the beautiful city of Cape Town, a mountain, the city at the base of the mountain. And to think of all those years looking out that window, tortured a lot during those years too. His legacy is one of greatness. I think he is the greatest individual figure of the 20th century.